It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Robin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendo. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's been 8 years for me hosting Robin Minds, and I'm very grateful for all the support and constantly joining us every Sunday. Hopefully we are here for much longer. 2021 is here, but for a lot of people, it's just the calendar that's flipped. Most things, a lot of the madness that's went with 2020 still seems to be happening. But most importantly for us here in Nigeria, COVID is still very real and very around. There's talks about, the second wave all around the world. Numbers are going crazy. For the first time, we crossed 2 million infections in 1 week around the world. That's how much this virus is spreading, and the death rate is going crazy. Nigeria is experiencing numbers that we didn't even experience when we were on lockdown. So everybody just needs to be a little more responsible. Wear your masks where you should, and please socially distance and just follow the rules. I know there's talks about vaccines. Not a lot of clarity yet about what Nigeria's positioning is on that, but I do know that, that gives people some hope to know that, 2021 should hopefully be different from 2020. We're going to be talking about, factors that will change or shape Nigeria in 2021, and I'm joined here by God Bless Otubure, who's been away for a bit. Welcome back.
Thank you, absolutely.
How are you doing?
Great.
Let's start with COVID now, because that's a big one, and it's still a huge factor, probably even a bigger factor this year than it was last year. Last year it caught us unawares. This year we should have been able to plan probably better around it. Looking at Nigeria specifically, what are your thoughts, fears, concerns, hopes with regards to how the virus will probably affect the economy this year?
So funny when you look at what our analysis was at the end of last year, is that the economy performed somewhat better than expected, especially because we had to, open up, and even with the recession that happened. If the numbers keep rising, as we have now seen, and the fear of another lockdown, we might just see that it would affect any iota of growth that we have planned, or that if we look at what the economists have said. So if COVID continues to become a huge factor, then a lot of things will be affected. It's going to affect the economy.
We're in our second recession in 5 years, which is scary for a lot of people, and everybody who's in Nigeria is definitely feeling it in one way or the other, no matter how much your income or your status is. Specifically about the economy now, with COVID still around, are there any thoughts on how do I want to put this? Do you wonder how we're going to come out of this with COVID still around? China has been able to do it. They're one of the few economies that had experienced growth last year. Do you see Nigeria doing that?
Do I see Nigeria doing that? So the question will be, how do I think the current group of people managing this country can pull that off with the kind of population that we have? So if you look at the 13-point-something trillion budget, which it's a recovery and resilience budget, if we follow that budget and implement and try to achieve just, let's say, 70% of performance of that budget, I see us coming out better. But if we go on a lockdown again and it is global, because you look at it, what moves every economy is manufacturing, the service sector, and every other adjoining sector that play a role in how we produce, consume, and all of that. So if we don't produce and people don't consume and we don't have people coming in from other parts of the world, definitely it's going to be difficult coming out of this. It is absolutely going to be difficult, because right now we need to have more resources poured into certain sectors. We have to protect specific sectors that are responsible for the large chunk of what we do, especially when you look at oil. And then you look at the fact that they've been talking about, diversification to other parts of the economy. So if we're able to protect our manufacturing to a large extent, if we lose out on maybe foreign engagement and all of that, at least we must ensure that local consumption and manufacturing stays, so that there's a level of equilibrium even within, the local economy, even if we can't get anything coming in from other parts of the world.
How much of a role will the reopening of the borders play in this?
Oh, definitely. This is 2021, and the AFC, FTA has kicked off, and I think it's actually one of those things that will shape Nigeria moving forward. So if we have everything is international, but if we have West African trade still going on, and we can work with our neighbors to put better protocols to manage COVID, but we can trade. What it means is that what we didn't have in 2020, we're going to have in 2021.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you talk about manufacturing. There are certain sectors that are we're managing to thrive even with COVID, but there are certain sectors that were completely decimated. Tourism, the entertainment industry, those sort of sectors. We're hearing about clampdowns on nightclubs and places like that, where there's revenue there for people, but I mean, it can't be accessed. We don't know how long this is going to go on for.
Yeah.
How do we start to pivot? Manufacturing is a long-term goal. The open borders, yes, commodities will probably be a little more accessible and all of that. But are there any other sectors you see that will shine maybe this year?
So you look at technology. The tech space, literally, it was like the pandemic happened for technology to actually show the world that, look, it's possible for us to do something different. I think technology continuing the growth, because now you see a lot of out of non-physical engagements are now happening more virtually. And even on this show, you've seen people calling from, we've had guests coming in from other parts of the world, and you can see that. So tech would work. Medicine, so we'll look at health, right? More telemedicine would have attention this year. So we're going to see an explosion of the use of e-medicine in 2021. And when you look at other sectors that I think would also find expression that will shine, is entertainment somehow. Because what 2020 did for the entertainment industry was to look at and say, how do we redesign entertainment industry? People were releasing albums in 2020. Now you have, I think there's one of these comedians who now have a show on YouTube, right? And you can
That's Basket Mouth,
yeah, that's Basket Mouth, right? He has a show on YouTube, and you see a lot of these other comedians are now creating content that people can consume, right, within their homes. I didn't want to mention telecommunications. Clearly, that is going to keep shining. It's absolutely going to keep shining. So yeah.
Well, we're joined now online by Andrew Boforibo and Isabella Adedeji. Thanks for joining us. Same question to you guys. I don't know what your thoughts are on 2021 and how we're going to come out of this recession, how we're going to handle COVID, when the vaccine is going to get here. Are you hopeful for 2021 with the economy? Andrew?
Let me say that I have managed expectations for 2021 as far as the economy is concerned. The truth of the matter is, until we can fully open up, the Nigerian economy at any rate is bound to keep taking hits. And we can't fully open up because, one, the vaccine isn't here yet, and the vaccine won't be here anytime soon, at least not for Nigeria. The most optimistic estimates we have from the government is for doses by the end of the year, but even that is based on a lot of hope. And remember, that's 20 million people, so that's the max. And that doesn't even come close to our needs. For us to be resilient, we're talking about 70% coverage, so we're not anywhere close to that. So then the question now becomes, how are we going to handle our economy, sans vaccine in 2021? And if what we're hearing about this new second wave of COVID is right, if the severity of it, the symptoms and the virulency of it, if that's really bears out to be true, then we may end up with a situation where we're locking down far more frequently than any of us would hope or would have liked. And simply because we can't handle, the health implications of that. I don't think anybody wishes for that, but we have to start looking at that and seeing that, well, that might be the underlying problem for 2021.
Isabella, that's been an ongoing debate around the world. The UK went back and forth about, certain tiers and levels of lockdowns before finally going into a full lockdown again. No country wants to go into that again. But there's also, of course, the health implications, and people are actually literally dying. What do you think about a second lockdown happening here, and can we handle it?
I don't think we can handle a second lockdown. I think the economy is not prepared for it. I mean, when I think about 2020, I remember all those videos on social media where you had human beings almost looking like ants invading warehouses with palliatives. And I mean, there you had palliatives. We knew about these palliatives, but the government hasn't come out to say anything about maybe a second set of palliatives. If you're asking people to stay at home, people who live on less than $1 a day, people who earn a daily wage, then you need to have palliatives, and not palliatives that are stored up in warehouses, but palliatives that are going out to the people. So I don't believe the government can handle a second lockdown. Also, I mean, you are going to fund the budget, and the budget comes, a lot of revenue also is generated internally. So I'm thinking of taxes. If businesses are not open, if businesses are not making money, then how do they pay taxes to the government, and how does the government execute the budget? So I think from an economic standpoint, we can't afford a second lockdown. If we do go on a lockdown, then what about security measures in place? Again, I think about the NSAS protest, and even in the aftermath of the lockdown imposed in Lagos, and just the sheer amount of vandalization. I mean, there was also the loss of lives. I think the government will be looking very strongly into the full implications beyond just the virus. Incidentally, if you go to, say, countries like the United Arab Emirates, you see everybody wearing their masks. So it's not impossible. I was just really surprised at the 100% compliance from what I saw over the holidays. And I just had to ask someone, like, why is everybody wearing their mask? I mean, is it a carrot or stick policy? And they said, well, there is a fine in place if you do not wear the mask. And everybody has more or less gotten back to some level, a semblance of reality. I mean, the UAE, despite having so much oil, they rely a lot on tourism, and we've seen the numbers starting to rise again. So when I look at the UAE, I do believe that there is hope in Nigeria. I want to remain hopeful, because I think beyond even just the deaths that we're hearing about, and I mean, when you start hearing about people you know who are dying from this virus, or maybe known personalities, then that whole thing of it being a myth seems to start clearing away. But I really want to hold on to hope, because I believe that fear can also paralyze us. I mean, the fear of going out, the fear of going about our businesses, even the fear of just finding ways to be more innovative. So I do believe that 2021, just like God bless said earlier on, it's a time for tech to respond to the challenge. It's a time for innovation. And I believe that the young people who make the majority of this population will rise up to the challenge and be innovative. We've seen that in media and entertainment, in the services business, and I think we'll continue to pivot as necessary.
Thank you very much, Isabella. Let me come back to you now, Andrea, and I want to switch to education, because that took a major hit in 2020 with the ASU strikes, which I don't even know what the situation is. Yes, it's been called off, but there's also talk about schools not being able to open. Even those not in higher institutions could not go to school because of COVID. There's still COVID. Are we going to be able to make up enough ground? We don't even know how many schools can open and how, that's going to work with the pandemic still in sight. What are your thoughts on education this year?
Simply put, education this year, we're probably going to be seeing more of the same, because unfortunately, we have not seen a systemic response to the challenges of education, of educating during a pandemic. And you could say that that's the same problem across the board, not just in education. The thing with COVID is COVID rewards prepared societies and punishes unprepared ones. And so there is no getting around that. There is no way to hope your way through that. You simply are reaping what you sow as a society. And Nigeria has sown, 5 decades of lack of planning, on seriousness, no infrastructure, and no discipline. So here we are. So with education, for instance, now the vast majority of primary and secondary schools in Nigeria do not have the infrastructure and cannot afford the infrastructure for, school from home, e-learning, online education it's almost entirely out of the question for the students and pupils attending those schools. And the question now becomes, and for a lot of them, education, and that's not just the public schools. People always have the assumption that when we talk about underfunded schools, it's only the public schools. The vast majority of Nigerian pupils are in private schools, but those private schools just don't have the resources either. Not every private school is like, a highbrow one. Most of them don't have the resources. So the question now becomes, how will they get the resources to train those kids? Or are those kids going to have to, go into classes? And if that's the case, then it's going to be like Isabella talks about. We're going to have to use a lot of public discipline, wearing masks, distancing. And we saw in 2020 how most schools could not enforce, like when the students came back for WAEC, most schools could not enforce those, policies of distancing, and safety precaution. And so if we're now going to have to do that on a wider scale, a larger scale for all 12 basic classes, the question now becomes, how can we be optimistic that those precautions will still be taken? So are we basically saying, so again, we're left with a choice and there's no good answer. And I think that's one thing that Nigerians have to prepare themselves for in 2021, is that we are going to get the answers wrong because of our lack of resources, our lack of planning, and general indiscipline, we will not have any good answers. We're always going to have to choose between poverty and pandemic. And in education, we're going to have to choose between, shut down schools or, a rampant pandemic. And I'm not saying choose one or the other, but understand that those are your bad choices.
All right, I'll come back to you, Andrew and Isabella, but let me address something that in spite of all of these problems, there's still a huge factor that is unique to us in a certain way in Nigeria, and that's insecurity, which we're still battling. There's still, people who couldn't travel for Christmas because they were scared of certain factors. It's still, and a lot of people saw what happened with the lockdown in Lagos and got even more afraid. Are we seeing any concerted efforts? Are you hopeful that 2020 will throw up sort of a different dynamic for Nigerians with regards to their safety?
So I cannot, in all good conscience, say that yet, especially when you look at the way we discussed security in Nigeria in 2020. And the fact that looking at post-EndSARS reality, we discovered that you were actually on your own in this country, right? We were providing our own security. I mean, when you look at the jailbreaks, those were not just things that happened on its own. It's a huge reality call that we don't have the kind of security that we should have as a nation. Am I hopeful? So what I thought about in the analysis was, I do not see the service chiefs finishing 2021. I believe, and I'm saying it, and anyone can hold me to that. And if it doesn't happen, I'm going to apologize. I do not see the service chiefs remaining in office by the end of 2021.
Why?
Because clearly they have failed. The security apparatus, all of them have
And Mr. President
failed.
still seems to have faith in them.
He said their best is not enough. In a society where accountability is held top-notch, they have no business remaining there. So I believe that the force of nature, the evidence of failure, would so stare us in the face that the president himself would have to tell himself that it's time for these guys to go. If we have that change, it doesn't mean that the security challenges will stop immediately. Then we can begin to see that there is a concerted effort. When you look at when you look at the budget, defense has the highest. I was going to weigh in on the education bit, but I'm really distressed because this country doesn't seem like we are ready to make progress.
We're going to take a break now and come back and continue and conclude this conversation because, like we say in Nigeria, problem not the finish.
You need to finish.
Let's take a break and be right back. All right, welcome back. We're talking about factors that will shape Nigeria in 2021, and it's been pretty grim, to be honest, and I want to try and just lighten things up a little bit. Isabella, I'm sure you can hear me. 2021, yes, there's a lot of things that we are probably worried about. But are there things that give you hope, things that you're looking forward to, things that you might be looking at and saying, okay, this year could be at least better than last year?
Yes, definitely. I think 2020 has shown us what it is to be living with the pandemic. So, if anything, just like Godbless said, we're not prepared, but this is a time for us to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what worked during 2020? Why were we able to come out of a lockdown? Why were we able to keep the numbers low for so long? Apparently, something has been working. And I think kudos to the government. I mean, we might not always agree with them on every single thing, but they have had to take some tough decisions. And some of these decisions are beginning to pay off. I mean, the fact that even children were able to return back to schools, and we're not hearing of too many fatalities. I mean, that's something that we can take back. And I think even if, as the schools reopen again, we are more prepared. The teachers know that, okay, there's something called blended learning. For someone who works in the education sector, I think this has been a wake-up call for education practitioners, education providers to rethink how they're delivering service. And now we're seeing more people embrace technology. We're seeing teachers become very innovative, even in the rural areas where maybe you can't get the television lessons, or you can't get online learning. We're seeing people take megaphones and use maybe religious spaces, and still they're able to communicate. They're still able to reach their students. You're seeing people use WhatsApp to deliver lessons. So I think, if anything, that 2020 has shown us that we can be innovative as a people. Yes, the government needs to do more, but given the circumstances, I choose to see the glass as half full, because like I said earlier on, if we're all crippled with fear, then we will even start dying faster. The moment someone sneezes around you, you just believe, oh, they have COVID-19. And it reminds me of Ebola. And I think as a people, we were able to defeat Ebola, and we're just going to learn how to live with the virus.
But do you get this sense of optimism, though, from Nigerians when you speak with Nigerians?
Yes, I do get that sense of optimism. Life goes on, sadly, and I think we really embody that ego better. I don't know whether it has to do with maybe our religious convictions, whether it has to do with the fact that we've had to learn to live with so little and somehow make it work. Okay. But when I go to the markets, for example, I see optimism. When I go outside Lagos, because I believe the people who are in Lagos are very different. I was in the eastern part of Nigeria during the festivities, and there was a certain sense of hope and joy. And even a few months ago, I went to the southwestern part. So I do believe that beyond Lagos, where we're seeing huge numbers, there's that sense of hope that we've come out of it, we're doing better, and we're learning to live with it.
Thank you, Isabella. Andrew, do you share this optimism that Isabella has?
Well, let's put it this way. I'm glad it exists. But for myself personally, I guess I'll put it this way. Nigerians have been very happy and very hopeful people my whole life. While at the same time, Nigeria has gotten steadily, let's say, more challenged my whole life. So I think our optimism is not in itself pertinent if it does not lead to sound planning. Sun Tzu said, tactics without strategy is the longest path to victory, but tactics without strategy is a noise before defeat. And that's usually what happens with Nigeria. We're very hopeful, but we don't really have a plan to get there. And so in terms of one thing that I'm very optimistic about and hopeful of is the one sector that tried to keep Nigeria afloat. If you look at our GDP, we've been talking about the recessions. If you look at our GDP for the last year and a half, we've been seeing all the sectors are tanking, but one sector that's been going up, specifically in the service sector, is telecoms and ICT. So that's been one ray of hope in a in a very cloudy sky. But what's happening right now in IT and telecoms, you have this Damocles sword hanging over their heads with this NIN SIM integration thing.
So we'll have to get that right for things to work properly.
That any phone line that isn't, Yes, it has to be done. Or if, as the government seems to be suggesting, we're about to see a mass disconnection in February, the question now becomes what happens to the only sector that has seen positive GDP growth in the last 2 years?
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. Let me just round up quickly with God bless, because I want to get your own thoughts as well on what's giving you hope for this year before we quickly go.
What's giving me hope is that post-NSAS is reawakening the idea that this country belongs to young people. We will not be silenced. We will continue to speak up, and that we cannot continue with the way things are. And it has really revealed the fact that there is a relationship and there's a social contract. The contract is that we give you our power and our right to lead us, and we hold you accountable. And what 2021, the hope is that we were able to say we can get things done. We're not the generation that don't know their left from their right. That is what gives me hope. So we're going to meet the NIN registration challenge head on. We're going to get people registered. We're going to do it. And then another thing again that I think before I just round this off that will shape 2021 is politics and democracy. And the fact that we're going to have more investment in the civic space. Because what we have now seen is we don't have a thriving democratic space, every other thing will become endangered to the whims and caprice of authoritarian rules and people who kill institutions. So for me, I just believe that I'm excited about it, and I believe that we can get some things right in 2021 moving forward.
Thank you very much. God bless. Thank you very much, Isabella. Thank you very much, Andrew, for this very insightful conversation. We'll keep talking, hopefully for the good